Hello, and welcome once again to Loveland's Talking. My name is Andy Hiller. I'm with the Public Information Office here for the City of Loveland, and we're here again with you, the public, to share information about what's going on with your local government. Today we're going to be talking about a major incident that happened here in February, this past February, that killed 50 people, injured about 250, and caused havoc here in Loveland, in Fort Collins, at CSU, and everywhere in between. I'm sure you know I'm talking about the tornado that kind of touched down like a pogo stick at various places in Larimer County back in February. No? Confused? You didn't hear about it? Well, that's because you weren't in Emmisburg, Maryland for a drill involving an imaginary tornado, as I've just described. We were there, the folks here at this table, and that's what we're going to talk about: emergency preparedness, disaster preparedness, and our experience in Emmisburg for a 5-day training session. With me here, as I said, are people who were there. In all, there were about 75 folks from throughout Larimer County who were taking part in this drill. And what we're going to talk about in the next half hour or so is what is the Emergency Management Institute, where we all resided. We're going to talk about disaster planning, and specifically response and recovery portions of disaster planning. Presentations we heard from quite a number of national experts, and also our experiences and what impressed us and kind of what we took home from this experience. So let's begin by going around the table and having everybody introduce themselves. We'll start with Merlin on the far end.
Thanks, Andy. I'm Merlin Green. I help oversee our emergency management program here in the city of Loveland, and have been doing that for about 6 years now.
Okay, and I'm guessing by your outfit you're with the
fire department.
That's what that is. I can see by, all right. I can't, Merlin and I are pals. We got to give each other a hard time. Matter of fact, most of us here are pretty friendly with one another. Bonnie.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Steele. I work in the finance department as a compliance and payroll manager. So, which means that I work, I'm besides managing payroll and accounts payable, I also oversee a lot of the financial statement functions, and the external auditors come in every year and audit our financials, and then also I do pieces in the internal audit side as well.
Okay, so you're kind of, in my words, kind of the money lady.
Yes.
Okay, very important person. Okay. Mick.
I'm Mick Mercer, and I'm a manager in the Public Works Department, and I manage the street department, the solid waste collection program, trash collection, recycling, the stormwater maintenance program, the crews that sweep the streets and maintain the storm sewers and the drainage ways. And I also have mosquito control. I'm the administrator of the mosquito control program, which is a contractual function.
I see you have a lot on your plate.
At times, yes.
Yes, okay. Pat.
My name is Pat Miali. I'm with the Loveland Fire Department also. And along with Merlin, I help with the emergency management program for the city.
Okay. You two are the primary emergency management people for the city in terms of planning and making things hopefully work smoothly to the extent that they can in an emergency. Okay, so we're going to, let's see, you introduced yourselves. I wanted to show this slide in advance of the Emergency Management Institute introduction. It's under the Homeland Security Department / FEMA, and it's in delightful, and it is pretty delightful, Emmisburg, Maryland, which is where? One of you guys? Merlin?
Approximately about an hour and a half north and west of Baltimore, Maryland, about that same travel distance from Washington, D.C. So most people relate to it as it's 20 miles south of Gettysburg.
Okay.
So a lot of history back there in that area.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that, well, here probably with the next slide. This overhead kind of shows the facility. I don't remember how many acres this was, but this was not built specifically for this purpose. This facility goes back a long time. You two folks, Pat and Merlin, have been there a few times. You're the most familiar. Would one of you like to give us a little bit of history on this place?
Sure. This facility started out as an all-women's college. Actually, when it started, it was a nunnery. And the nuns back there actually helped provide medical first aid to the men in the Civil War,
Wow.
injured war people. And then it became St. Joseph's College. It was an all-women's college, and that closed, and the federal government took it over in 1973, and that's where now it's used for the National Fire Academy and the Emergency Management Institute.
Okay, and continue on that. So one of the uses is the National Fire Academy, where fire folks from all over the country, probably the world, come for a specialized training.
They do. They have programs in fire prevention, arson investigations, leadership courses. So you have leaders, fire chiefs that can work on degree programs through the National Fire Academy. They also have a multitude of programs that assist first-line supervisors or company officers with decision-making and tactics and strategies for fire ground incidents.
Okay. Well, fire is certainly one of the disasters or emergencies that this facility helps train folks for. I'm going to run through a couple of the, so here's kind of an overview of several different ones, and depending on when you're there and specifically what type of disaster or incident you're there to train for, some of these that we're going to see may come in to play. This looks like a wildfire. That could certainly happen around here. Been there, done that, huh? Has
Yes.
recently. Yeah, yeah. This goes without saying, although we don't get that many ice storms. Usually it's blizzards and snowstorms. Were either of you guys back there for that, in '03 for that training program?
I was too.
You were?
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that. What happened? Just incidentally, what happened?
Well, we went back for training for the event was a snowstorm, a bad snowstorm, which is very likely for us where we live.
A simulated storm.
A simulated snowstorm, and we went back there with folks from Fort Collins and Larimer County, and we had a major simulated snow event that we were training for. And at the same time, unbelievably,
As luck would
we
have
were
it.
there in March, and literally at the same time we were there, here, back home, we got hit with like a 30-inch snowstorm. So we're all out there doing a mock disaster, and they were having the real thing here. And so it was very interesting.
Yeah, I remember that, the city was impassable. The city offices and services were closed down. Schools were closed down. DIA was closed. Anyway, so.
Well, while they were back there doing that, I was here living it real time, and I never forget the fire chief at that time called me and he says, Merlin, is it as bad there as what we're seeing on TV? It's like, no, it's worse, chief. Thanks for the call, though.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there's kind of a joke or a superstition that whatever you go to train for there, you're likely to run into here. I remember, well, Pat, you were involved in this. 2 years ago, it was wait a minute, I think we have a slide. Maybe it'll be the next one. I'll get lucky here. Come on, little clicker. You can do this. Nope. Tornado was here. There you go. 2 years ago, the incident was a major flood with both the Cache La Poudre and Big Thompson flooding. And tell us what was going on at the same time.
Well, I could basically say almost everything that Mick just said about the snowstorm, in the fact that our disaster scenario was a major flood event. And while we were in the throes of doing this exercise, it started to rain very heavily, and we were having localized flooding here at home simultaneously once again. And in this case, we were able to send some of our top-level managers back home very quickly in order to get here back home prior to the worst part of the event happening. And fortunately for us, it didn't turn into a large-scale flood, but we were this close again.
Yeah.
So it was almost comical.
Yeah, you guys were, or you especially, I remember, were involved with the airlines getting people out very quickly at a moment's notice. It was with 2 hours' notice to get from Emmisburg to the airports instead of our normal reservations a couple of days later. So anyway, so hopefully we will, well, we did have, this exercise was a tornado, and of course there was a tornado, was it in '08 in Windsor, and we were all in the EOC here because who knew where it was actually going to hit. So anyway, this stuff is very close to real life. And one thing I'd also ask, as I understand it, some of the people from FEMA actually come to town in advance of this to take photographs and put together a real scenario as opposed to just making up a generic situation. So I find that very interesting.
Yeah, it certainly helps with the exercise, providing realism when you're taking pictures of this building or other buildings within your community. It definitely adds a sense of that realism, as I stated, for the participants, versus looking at buildings that you've never seen before. That takes away from it.
Yeah, well, during the incident we're going to be talking about, there were some slides of this building we're sitting on with a little help from Photoshop or whatever, where half the building was missing or the second floor was gone because of the tornado that hit right here. Okay, so let me go through the rest of it, and here's another, probably the biggest catastrophe we've seen in this country in a long time. So these are some of the things that the emergency management people are there to be trained for. So when you're out there, it takes about a whole week between the training and travel. You guys who are veterans of this, is it worth it?
Oh, by all means. You're back there, number one, with your peers. You're back there with people you've never worked with before, and it gives you an opportunity to build relationships with them. Plus, the instructors that come in are some of the best in the business. They are by far the most premier instructors. What they talk about, they've been there, they've done that, they've lived it, and it's top-of-the-line training.
Pat, about 20 folks from Loveland were among the 75 or so there. Was it basically just police and fire people? Those are the people you tend to think of, with an emergency situation.
Actually, Andy, there was many more participants other than the police and fire. When it comes to the first few minutes of responding to an incident or a disaster, yes, we typically think of police and fire and also public works. Because those are the folks that have the equipment and expertise to do a lot of the support work. But when it comes to a disaster, we really require so many other types of support from other, not only departments in the city, but also other agencies, from the county level, and also from our sister community in Fort Collins. There's a saying that every disaster is local. And what that means is that basically, when it hits your home, you have to use what resources are closest, and then keep reaching out in layers from there. So this particular exercise, we brought back the 20 people from Loveland, and also about 50 or so folks from the city of Fort Collins, from some of the other communities, as well as Larimer County proper. And it gave us the opportunity to work together as a large group, and to work through solving the problems of what a tornado incident would be, especially after the tornado is long gone and there's all this work to be done afterwards.
Okay. And one thing that I think Mother Nature doesn't pay much attention to boundaries on a map or jurisdictions. If there's going to be a tornado or a flood or something like that, it's not just in Loveland. Some of it may actually be beyond the city limits and in the county, or maybe into Berthoud or something like that. So this broad group of people from throughout working together and shoulder to shoulder and getting to know each other and learning who to call and that sort of thing is real beneficial. So that was I thought was very significant. So, okay, Pat, I'm going to put you on the spot here, okay? These are kind of, as my understanding, if I can get this clicker to work again. Oh, There you go. The elements of emergency preparedness. Go around the circle real quick and just define each one for us.
Oh, absolutely. This is the cycle for managing all types of incidents, whether they're very large or very small. We saw that in the localized blizzards that we've had, all the way up to incidences that are the size of Katrina. Every single one of them follows the same cycle. So starting with preparedness, which is on the far left side, those are going to be the things like identifying what types of hazards are local. For example, we know that Colorado is prone to disasters, but not prone to hurricanes. So we do all of our emergency preparedness based on the hazards that are known or that are anticipated. From there, we do response training, and that is, of course, police and fire and public works are going to be doing their everyday training on how to fix what's broken. But in addition to that, the response also reaches out to people like Bonnie who have the checkbook, and we work with Bonnie's group to have protocols and procedures in place prior to the disaster so that we're not developing policy right then and there while the disaster's happening.
Okay.
From there, we move on to recovery. And recovery is everything that happens once, so to speak, the dust settles. So the tornado is gone, it has stopped snowing. Now we figure out what we're going to do about removing debris, about search and rescue, about short-term and long-term sheltering for people who have now become homeless. And so those are the things that we need to address, and the recovery phase can be anywhere from days to weeks to months, and as we've seen in Katrina, sometimes even years.
Yep.
And then with mitigation, that's where we come back full circle and we reevaluate what the local hazards are, see if those hazards have changed, and then readapt our response and recovery plans to address anything that may have changed.
Okay, good. Kind of learning from the past, not see what can be improved upon to prevent things from reoccurring or minimize them if they do reoccur. Okay, well, I wanted to click on the next slide here. Like I said, we were there in class for 4 days straight, with the exception of the fine meals that we enjoyed in the cafeteria there. You had to be there. And these were some of the presentations that we saw. Why don't we, again, Pat, will start with you. Pick one or two that you thought were interesting, or one or two that you kind of would be assigned to you or you'd work most closely with.
Okay. I would be assigned to the emergency program management in so much that my job would be to help facilitate the overall larger management of the incident itself. I wouldn't be in charge, but I would be supporting those people who would be making the decisions and making sure that whatever gets requested or whatever is needed to get work done, that vehicle or that conduit is in place. So that would be one of my primary responsibilities.
Okay. Okay. Mick?
Well, Public Works is very involved in most disasters, either snowstorms or cleaning up the debris that's in the street. Streets are blocked. In the case of a tornado, there's stuff everywhere, and you've got to open those streets up quickly so that emergency vehicles can get to where they need to go and people can just start to move around. So we would be right smack in the middle of that. If buildings are damaged, we have to send out damage assessment teams and figure out what's safe and what isn't safe, what bridges are maybe not safe and need to be closed off, what roads aren't safe, what structures should be taped off so people can't go in them because they're not safe, or maybe they're okay. Having to relocate, in this case, if the city facility were taken out, we still have to function. The community still needs us to do our normal jobs, but we have no phones, no desks, no computers, so we have to rebuild that very quickly somewhere. And so in this exercise, we had folks who were faced with that very scenario, and they had to find office space very quickly for city staff so we could get up and function again, because our community was torn apart, and you have to be able to respond real quickly to get people up and running again and start to recover.
So the City Hall kind of being flattened, that was a physical problem. It wasn't kind of a political suggestion in this.
Yeah.
That City Hall was dismantled. Okay, sorry. Andy's sense of humor, or lack thereof. Okay, Bonnie, on to you.
Well, with the finance department, the documentation is definitely a key component to what we would be doing. Kind of as Pat mentioned earlier, the purchasing piece, making sure that Public Works has everything that they need, and if we need to go out there and purchase barricades or items or whatnot, we have to make sure that we also document all that and make sure that the contracts are correct and go with it at a moment's notice. And in addition to that, we also have, being in charge of payroll, we need to make sure that all the employees are getting paid during this emergency. So depending on when the payroll hits, we need to make sure that employees are still getting paid so that they are still okay helping and going out there and not feeling like we've left them behind either. So documenting, also documenting, employees have to make sure that they're documenting project numbers for timesheets so that we can make sure that we get all that included so that if we do get federal funds, we can apply for that with all the documentation.
So your office is running the bulldozers, and you're doing the paper and pencil work for all of this. Okay. Okay. Merlin?
Well, I would be with Pat. I'd be supporting the emergency program management component of that, and really the bigger picture for me is I play a supporting role to these folks of what resources are they needing, what components, what can I bring to the table to assist them to get their job done, and ensuring that we're following our established emergency response plans. We're following what our guidelines are and working with local officials, working with county officials, state officials, and even federal officials, because an event of this magnitude would bring in the federal government early on, within 72, most likely maybe 96 hours out. But it'd be a lot of coordination, working with them, getting them set up. Number one, where are they coming to? Where are they meeting the officials in Loveland? And
Sure.
A lot of that. So that'd be my main role.
Okay. And as you folks know, my role here, there was in regard to public information. There were 4 of us shoulder to shoulder sitting in the EOC Emergency Operations Center, gathering information, confirming it, so because sometimes you don't quite hear it right the first time and it's pretty busy and noisy in there, and then outputting it to the media using our own websites, that sort of thing, and not only for people's curiosity but for their benefit and safety, where shelter is, if there was a problem with the quality of water, don't drink the water or shut this off, or whatever it may be. One thing that I'm doing a double take because every time I think of it, it puts a smile on my face you don't think about, but this is a significant incident. We've had it happen for real here, is pets and animals. You know, everybody's worried about evacuations and pet and that sort of thing, but where does your dog and cat go? And you know, that's a lot easier than where do your horses and your llamas go, and your livestock and whatever else you might have if you live, you know, in the outskirts of town. So those are the types of things that that the public information folks are trying to communicate to all the people during the course of all of this. So that was kind of my role. So after we kind of as we went through these various presentations, we were also involved in major hands-on drills where we left the classroom as it was and went to a simulated emergency operations center with computers and phones and projectors and maps and all that sort of thing, and they were maps of Fort Collins and Loveland and CSU as if this were happening for real. And the first drill, and each drill was several hours long, was the response drill when the tornado was actually hitting and what's going on, and that was very chaotic for everybody involved, as everybody can imagine, during, if it were real or a drill. And then the second drill, which was actually two kind of back-to-back drills, had to do with recovery. And Pat, if I remember, they kind of paused and went 3 days hence as to now literally the dust has literally settled from the tornado, but now you've got all these other issues to deal with, and that was kind of the main focus for this outing at Emmisburg. So once again, let's kind of go around the table and just talk a bit about what you were doing during either or both drills. Merlin, what was your kind of hands-on experiences? What would you like to share?
Well, for this exercise, I was actually, Mick and I, we were part of the exercise design team. So while we were giving you the information, we were giving you injects, as they call them, but we were helping guide the exercise to move forward on realistic time frames, what are realistic scenarios or events that would have been impacting the different departments. And so it was very interesting this time, and all the times I've been back there, to be kind of behind the scenes and helping move the incident forward, and to see how people reacted, how the event unfolded, was a big eye-opener for me.
Mick, you were in that role as well?
I was, and just so people understand what it's like, we were in a different room with phones and computers, and we were role-playing, and we had a kind of a rough script that we helped prepare, and of course the exercise controller helped prepare, and we sort of followed that script by a timeline, and threw in the injects, the scenarios that we were testing the group in the other rooms on, to see how they would handle it, and we kind of had some ideas of what we would have liked them to do, and then we sit back and see whether they do that or not, or throw in some more injects. And my role as a public works person was to play various public works roles. So if somebody in the emergency operations center said, hey, we need as 5 front end loaders and as many end dump trucks as we can get, they would call a phone number, and I would be the person they were trying to get that information from, or get those resources from. And so then I would role play and either go along or maybe throw them a little curve and make them find some other resources somewhere else. But as realistic as possible. It's kind of controlled chaos, really, but amazingly, people are really good when they're put under pressure, and they know their jobs really well. And so they really respond really quite well.
Kind of thinking of it as if this were a movie in the making, and you guys were kind of the directors behind the scene, and saying, all right, let's pretend that this street is blocked, etc., and then the actors, the players, the rest of us had to go about unblocking that street or whatever it might be.
Right.
Bonnie, what about you?
Well, for the first piece of the scenario, which was the response portion of it, I was in the finance section, so there was another purchasing buyer with me, as well as a gentleman from Fort Collins, and then all the logistics and the GIS was in the same room with us. So we were getting all of this information in, but at that particular scenario for the response, there was really nothing that we could do. So we just had to be very, very patient and just wait until we get the phone calls and the emails. So that was kind of hard, because we knew that there was nothing except for just start setting things up in order to get our documentation in place. But then when we got to the recovery portion, it was very chaotic and it was very busy, and we definitely got a lot more not only just phone calls about what's going on out there and what resources are needed out there, but also the piece of where we're starting to get employees back into the buildings and where to put them, and IT needed some resources, and they needed some information about what we needed, so it was quite busy during
Okay.
the second half.
Well, I'm going to then follow up next because my role was kind of the opposite. My role was very frantic, or the other information people, especially during the response when the phones were ringing, the police and the fire department were calling in, what's happening here, can I get from here to there? Theoretically, the public was calling in, worrying about their kids. Businesses were calling in, worried about, do I need to close my business and send people home, or is there a health threat here, or hazardous materials spill here? And of course, the media supposedly was calling in, and the helicopters were coming in, and they want interviews and people to talk to. So the first portion of it is very frantic, and then kind of for us the recovery portion 3 days later was an opportunity to breathe a little sigh of relief, and then kind of be able to plan to put out, we need to get information to this group of people, and the best way to do it is this, or different opportunities to do it kind of on a more planned out and slow pace, and also double check and make sure the information out there is accurate. One of the issues that happen in any kind of major incident like this is misinformation and rumors, and people go the wrong direction. So we had a little more time to double check ourselves and catch our breath a little bit during both of those. Pat?
For the first portion of the exercises on the response side, there was 3 of us that were acting in the role of Emergency Operations Center Director, and typically speaking, there's usually less people than that. So I shared some of the requests and response for that particular position. But during the recovery portion of the exercise, just as in real life, the policy group, or all of the administrators and city council people and commissioners got together to develop policy that was needed based by the needs of the incident. Well, they expressed a need to have a direct communication connection between where they were and the Emergency Operations Center. So I became a liaison, or a go-between those 2 groups of people. So on the second portion, my primary responsibility was to make sure that the policymakers got all the information that they needed in order to make their decisions.
And that brings up some of the other participants that we didn't really allude to directly. In reality, one of our county commissioners was there, but if this were a real incident, there would be city councilors and mayors involved in this, the city manager. There was one city manager present at the event, so those are kind of the policymakers. And of course with them, well, everybody does, why should I be different? All the attorneys and the lawyers that come with that, and there were 2 or 3 attorneys from the different agencies here. There were people, of course, from water and power, because when this happens, water lines break and the power lines go down. And another group that I'm going to mention, because every time I interact with them, they really impress me, which is the staff and the group at the 211 call center. A lot of people aren't familiar with 211. 911 is emergency, but 211 is where you can call for help, and the people there are very well versed in all, especially the nonprofit and assistance organizations throughout the region that can help people, whether it's during an emergency or just an incident at home on a Wednesday night. And they always impress me, and there were a couple of people there from the 211 agency doing a fine job in all of this. So that was one of the things I was going to mention in the next round, so let's begin that. And the next round was going to be, what are some of the things that you take away and have really impressed you about this experience? So, Pat?
This was my second opportunity to be involved in a large-scale disaster exercise back at EMI campus. And in both instances, I can't tell you just how interesting it is and how wonderful it is to see people who have never worked before be faced with incredible challenges.
Worked with each other before.
Have never worked, yes, exactly.
We never worked an emergency incident
right,
before.
and may have never even met each other before.
Right.
And they get together, away from home, away from everything that they know, the people that they know, they're resourceless, they're contactless, and they still are able to address the challenges that are thrown at them, and they do it very, very well. I am so impressed by that.
Okay, good. And whether they were just saying this to make us feel better or not, but the instructors who taught these classes and oversaw all of this, plus all the administrators at the EMI campus went out of their way to give all the people there, the whole Larimer County crew, all 75 of us, a pat on the back and say that we are much better prepared than some of the other folks that come to visit them. And I hope they were not just being pleasant to us, but that indeed was the case. Mick, some of your impressions.
Well, this was my third opportunity to go back there. The snowstorm in 2003, the mock snowstorm, the flood a couple of years ago, and then this tornado. Every time I learned something, and every time I was impressed by both the instruction and by the opportunity to get to meet my peers from other organizations, some of whom I knew before, many of them I didn't, and get to meet other people, and then get to watch people work together. And as Pat said, it's hard not to be very impressed with the quality of the public employees in this area, how quickly they can take charge, prioritize, work together, and really get stuff done. And you can see it. You can just see it during one of these. Yeah, it's an exercise, but it's still, people take it seriously, and they're real life scenarios. I mean, we can relate to a tornado because we saw one hit Windsor a couple years ago. So we get that. Same thing with the snowstorm, same thing with the flood. You know, we don't get hurricanes, luckily. Those people who go back and train for hurricanes, they know it's just a matter of time before they're going to get nailed by a hurricane. Well, we go at it with a tornado in mind, snowstorm, flood. So really good stuff. As a result of having had the opportunity 3 times to go through that and realize what we're good at and maybe what we're not so good at from a public works perspective, I have learned enough to draft some emergency management documents from a public works perspective about what our role is, airport, transit, streets, solid waste, facility management, vehicle maintenance, what we need to be doing during an emergency, and have it spelled out. And also a debris management plan. Having been through some of these, anytime you have a natural disaster, you're going to have a mess that needs to be cleaned up, and you have to do it quickly. And how do you go about that is a huge, overwhelming task. But by planning it, pre-planning it, it helps you then if you have the misfortune of having to go through the real deal. And I'm hoping this is all insurance that means it'll never happen.
Right.
But hopefully we'll be better prepared should it happen.
Bonnie, you're kind of the rookie here, huh?
Yep. Well, this is my first time
Yep.
going to get trained on an emergency. So it was definitely an eye-opener for me, because the one thing, being behind the desk all day, you don't really think about all the components that are involved when an emergency like this happens. So it was definitely quite interesting to find out all the different components, like debris or some of the other areas involved. So it was great learning for me. And then also taking that back here, realizing what my role would be during an emergency, or what the finance departments would be in the purchasing as well. So it was quite a bit of information in that week, and I think learned a lot, definitely. So.
Good. And again, as Mick said, hopefully it's information and training we'll never have to use for real, but who knows?
It was also really great to see how the different organizations just meshed so well, because during those hectic, chaotic times, it was great to see how we just all came together as one. So that was nice to see as well.
Merlin?
Well, tagging on to what everybody else has already said, you know, it's exciting for me to watch different departments within our own community come together. A lot of them, just as Bonnie's, she's never trained on emergency management, on dealing with emergencies, and so this was a whole new world for her, but she understands that she is a key component, and her entire division is a key component to getting the community back up and running. And the cost recovery, the documentation, I mean, those are huge items that you just cannot put enough emphasis on. And to watch people come together that have never worked together before and develop their relationships and develop really good, solid planning processes, it's exciting to watch. We are very fortunate. And to what you said with the instructors, they meant every word they said about us in Larimer County, Fort Collins, Loveland, that we are on top of emergency management, emergency preparedness, far more than a lot of other areas of the country. And that speaks well to the staff here and how well they do work together, because as all of us know, it's a whole lot easier making a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning to my neighbor up the road and know exactly what we're talking about, and he knows me, I know him, and versus somebody, I'm making a phone call to somebody I've never talked to before in my life. It's relationships are everything.
You made me think of an experience on vacation pretty recently. I stopped in, and I kind of ran into the emergency manager of a community a little bit about our size here in Loveland, in another state, and we got to talking about emergency management, etc. And with no offense to him and them, I couldn't help but think it's night and day different. What they were worried about, as opposed to the big picture and all the training and everything that we've received, not just us here at the table and here in Loveland, but Fort Collins, Loveland, Estes Park, Red Feather, all the people from the county in between. It's pretty remarkable. I guess some of the things that I took away, you know, when you're involved in your own stuff, public information and getting information out, that's kind of what I do. So that didn't surprise me, but the broader things that I hadn't thought about, documentation, which was really brought home, all this has to be paid for somehow, and it all has to, everything's got to be kept track of. The policymakers make decisions whether to apply for a state disaster with the governor or a national disaster with the president, and if so, in order to get repaid through all of that, everything you do has to be documented. And you think, boy, with all this going on, who's got time to, you know, to document and take notes? But you got to plan for it and prepare for it. The debris clearing. Right now, as we tape this, is just shortly after the tsunami in Japan, and every time I see one of those news things where there are these huge piles of disaster, but people walking down a path or a road that's clear, somebody had to clear that in the midst of all of that. Otherwise, people couldn't get from point A to point B. Decisions have to be made with the policymakers. Which road are you going to clear first? The one to the hospital, or maybe the one to the police station? Those sorts of things that you don't think of. Again, most people with an incident or disaster think of fire and police and lights and sirens, but it's all the other pieces. Who's going to get the power back on? Who's going to get the water flowing? Who's going to shelter people? Where do the animals go? Where do the people who can't afford to find a motel down the road, where are they going to be sheltered? Food, water, all of that. It really is an eye-opener. And I've done it before. This is my second time, but I think I was so involved with my own portion the first time, a little nervous about doing a good job, that this time I was able to see the bigger picture. And it's quite an eye-opener. So that's my aha moments. Anything else you folks want to share?
Just wanted to mention that this training is offered to applicants either by individual agency or by large group. We like to go as the county because we're probably going to be working together in a large-scale disaster anyway, so why not train together as well? But this opportunity is provided to us relatively free of charge. The travel and accommodations is all paid for by DHS funding, and so long as that funding is available, then we'll continue to apply and try to keep going back as often as we can.
Good, good. Yeah, I meant to mention that you're not writing a check for all the airfare and all the accommodations and food. It's all being taken care of by Department of Homeland Security. So thanks for pointing that out. Okay. Well, with that, unless anybody else wants to mention something, we'll call it a day and recall the 5 days that we spent out there. And folks, I hope for you this has been a little bit enlightening. For us, it was a big eye-opener, but I guess the message to you folks is that here in Loveland and throughout the county, we are making active efforts and doing our best to prepare for the worst, and while at the same time keeping our fingers crossed that it's all unnecessary. So until next month, thank you for watching Loveland's Talking. We'll see you then. Enjoy springtime. Bye-bye.